There is a particular kind of suffering that nobody talks about. It doesn't come from cruelty. It doesn't come from failure. It comes from being genuinely, instinctively, constitutionally good in a world that was not designed with goodness in mind. If that describes you, if kindness is not something you perform, but something you simply are, then what you are about to hear may be the most uncomfortable truth you will encounter for a long time. Not because it is false, but because it will ask you to look clearly at something you have been quietly avoiding. You have spent years doing the right thing. You've given people the benefit of the doubt. You've extended grace when grace was not asked for. You have listened when you were exhausted, helped when you had nothing left, stayed when every rational signal told you to leave. And somewhere in the middle of all that goodness, you started noticing a gap. A gap between what you were told the world would give back and what the world actually returned. You did not become bitter about it. You became confused. And then, quietly, you became depleted. This video is not here to rescue you with inspiration. Inspiration is a drug, and you are done being medicated. What you need is clarity. What you need is the specific, uncomfortable, structurally sound understanding of why your kindness has been working against you, and what it looks like to stop letting it. Niccolo Machiavelli did not write about evil. He wrote about reality. He observed human behavior not as it was preached from pulpits or promised in philosophy classrooms, but as it actually functioned in courts, in councils, in the raw machinery of human ambition. He watched what happened when idealism met power, and he wrote down what he saw with the precision of a surgeon and the patience of someone who had already stopped being shocked by it. His conclusion was not that people are monsters. His conclusion was that structure determines behavior. If the structure rewards taking, people will take. If the structure rewards appearing virtuous while acting strategically, people will appear virtuous while acting strategically. This is not pessimism. This is the operating system. When you move through this operating system as a naturally kind person, without adjusting your behavior to account for its actual mechanics, you are not morally superior. You are structurally exposed. You are a person who has memorized the rules of chess, but insists on playing checkers, and wonders why the board never works in your favor. The first dark principle you must absorb is this: your openness is not intimacy. It is inventory. The naturally kind person confuses emotional transparency with relational depth. They believe that sharing their process, their doubts, their intentions and vulnerabilities is how trust is built. And in a world of purely reciprocal, psychologically healthy relationships, that belief would be correct. But in the actual world, which contains not only the emotionally healthy, but also the strategically calculating, the subtly envious, the unconsciously opportunistic, openness functions as disclosure. And disclosure, in the wrong environment, is not a bridge. It is a map of your defenses. Think about the last time you explained yourself to someone who didn't ask for an explanation. Think about the last time you justified a decision to someone who had no stake in it. Think about how often you share your plans before they are complete, your doubts before they are resolved, your fears before they are conquered. You do this because you believe that being seen is the same as being safe. But being seen by the wrong audience is not safety. It is exposure. Machiavelli observed that the prince who reveals his thinking to advisors who have not yet proven their loyalty does not gain counsel. He surrenders his leverage. The same principle operates in every relationship. The colleague who knows your insecurities can frame the conversation to maximize them. The friend who knows your fears can, consciously or not, use that knowledge to manage your behavior. The person who knows exactly how much you care about keeping the relationship intact knows precisely how much they can take without triggering your exit. This does not mean you should become opaque, guarded, or cold. It means you should become intentional. You can be warm without being an open book. You can be generous without being predictable. You can care deeply about someone without handing them a manual to your pressure points. The boundary here is not between sharing and not sharing. The boundary is between sharing what serves the relationship and disclosing what merely satisfies your need to be understood. Those two things feel identical from the inside. They have entirely different consequences. The second dark principle is this: intentions are invisible. Incentives are not. This is the adjustment that changes everything. When you evaluate the people around you, you listen to what they say about themselves. You listen to their stated reasons, their explanations, their professed values. And because your own stated reasons match your actual reasons, because you are not performing goodness, but living it, you extend that same interpretive framework to everyone else. You assume that the person who says they care, cares. You assume that the person who promises loyalty intends to be loyal. You assume that the person who presents themselves as an ally is not simultaneously calculating their advantage. Machiavelli would not tell you to assume everyone is lying. He would tell you that the question of whether someone is lying is almost irrelevant. What matters is what they stand to gain. What changes when the stakes shift. What they have consistently done when the cost of doing the right thing was real and personal. People do not reveal themselves in their good moments. They reveal themselves precisely when staying honorable would cost them something. Watch for that moment. Watch how long it takes before comfort becomes more important than commitment. Watch what someone does when two values collide, and one of them is self-interest. This kind of watching is not cynicism. Cynicism is a conclusion. What Machiavelli is describing is a method of observation. You are not deciding that people are bad. You are deciding to read behavior rather than biography. There is a profound difference between those two things, and that difference is what separates the endlessly betrayed from the strategically clear. The third dark principle is this: without consequence, your kindness is not a virtue. It is a service. Here is what happens in relationships where you have not established consequence. People learn your tolerance the way water learns stone. Not all at once. Gradually, through small tests that are not even necessarily conscious. They arrive late, and you don't mention it. They cancel, and you rearrange. They push past a boundary you stated once softly, and you let it pass, because the conflict felt more costly than the boundary. Each accommodation teaches them the actual map of your limits, not the stated one. The result is not malice on their part. It is calibration. You have taught them, through consistent demonstration, exactly what is acceptable and what will be tolerated and what will eventually be forgiven. Machiavelli's most misread observation is the one about fear and love. He did not say that being feared is superior to being loved as a moral proposition. He said that when a leader cannot maintain both, the one that actually preserves their position is the capacity to establish consequence. Because love, in Machiavelli's framework, is a feeling that lives inside another person and can shift without notice. Consequence is a structure that exists independent of feeling. You cannot control whether someone loves you. You can control whether there is a cost to losing you. Consequence does not require dramatics. It does not require speeches or confrontations or declarations of self-respect. It requires only this: that your no means something. That your withdrawal of access is real and not immediately reversed by guilt. That when you say you will not tolerate a behavior, the tolerance actually ends. This is not punishment. This is the basic grammar of a relationship with a self-respecting adult in it. When people sense that grammar, something shifts. Your kindness stops registering as background generosity and starts registering as a deliberate offering. That shift changes everything about how it is received. The fourth dark principle. Rescue is not always kindness. Sometimes it is interference with consequence. This is the one that tends to land hardest for people with genuine compassion. You are drawn to struggle. You can feel when someone is suffering, and the instinct to alleviate that suffering is not performative. It is visceral. You stay longer than you should in situations that drain you, because abandoning someone who is struggling feels like a violation of your values. You give resources, time, emotional labor, and attention to people who say they want to change, but whose behavior remains consistent in the direction of stagnation. And at some deep level, you believe that if you just give enough, if you love hard enough, stay patient enough, sacrifice enough, transformation will eventually arrive. Machiavelli's realism is brutal here, and also correct. He understood that human beings are fundamentally motivated by proximity to comfort and distance from discomfort, not as a character flaw, but as a basic feature of how motivation operates. If someone can remain in a painful state while being buffered from its full consequences by your intervention, they have no organic pressure to change. You are not cruel for understanding this. You are accurate. The person who stops drowning every time you pull them out does not learn to swim. They learn that drowning triggers your response. The pattern continues not because they are broken, but because the structure rewards it. This does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you become indifferent to suffering. It means you begin to distinguish between support that creates capacity and support that substitutes for it. You can offer presence without offering rescue. You can offer perspective without offering solutions. You can care deeply about someone's development while allowing the friction that makes development possible. That distinction is the difference between compassion that helps and compassion that hinders. And the kindest people are often the worst at making it, because making it requires tolerating someone else's discomfort, which triggers every instinct in your body to move toward relief. The fifth dark principle. Your reputation is a structure, and structures can be designed. The naturally kind person tends to believe that image management is a form of inauthenticity. They associate reputation building with performance, with a kind of strategic self-presentation they find exhausting and ethically suspect. And so they allow their image to form by default, shaped by whoever interacts with them and whatever narrative emerges from those interactions. This is not integrity. This is abdication. Machiavelli understood that perception is not separate from reality in human affairs. It is a component of it. How you are seen shapes what is permitted around you. If your reputation is one of endless patience, you invite people to test that patience. If your reputation is one of unconditional availability, people will treat your time as a renewable resource. If your reputation is one of immediate forgiveness, people will gamble on that forgiveness, the way casual gamblers play a machine they've seen pay out before. Your image, left unmanaged, becomes a set of permissions you never consciously granted. Designing your reputation is not the same as manufacturing a false persona. It is deciding which truths about you are communicated clearly and which assumptions you are willing to let stand. You can be genuinely warm and also ensure that people understand there are conditions. You can be genuinely generous and also be known for having standards. You can be genuinely forgiving and also be known as someone who remembers patterns. The information is all true. The difference is intentionality. Intention is what separates someone who is read as strong from someone who is read as soft, even when their actual behavior is nearly identical. Now, something deeper needs to be said about all 5 of these principles together, because there is a mistake that even intelligent people make when they first encounter this framework. They believe the goal is to become harder, to cauterize the instinct for kindness and replace it with calculated detachment, to transform into something colder and more maneuverable. This is not the goal, and it is not what Machiavelli is actually describing when you read him carefully, rather than reactively. The goal is the preservation of your capacity for genuine connection by protecting it from systematic extraction. There is a difference between a person whose warmth has been depleted and a person whose warmth has been protected. The depleted person becomes cynical, withdrawn, and sometimes cruel in the reactive sense, not calculating, just defended. The protected person remains warm, remains capable of genuine generosity and real loyalty, but from a position of structure rather than exposure. They give because they choose to, not because they cannot stop themselves. They stay because the relationship merits it, not because leaving feels impossible. They forgive because it serves the relationship, not because they cannot hold a standard. That version of kindness, deliberate, structured, protected, is not a lesser form of goodness. It is a more sustainable one. It is the version that survives. It is the version that can be maintained for years, days, a lifetime, without burning to ash and becoming its opposite. There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes when you begin to apply these principles. Not the loneliness of isolation, but the loneliness of renegotiation. When you stop being endlessly available, some people will drift. When you establish real consequence, some people will leave rather than adjust. When you stop rescuing, some people will interpret your non-intervention as betrayal. When you manage your image more carefully, some people will feel distance where they used to feel easy access. These departures are not losses in the deepest sense, but they register as losses, and you should not pretend otherwise. What Machiavelli understood about this kind of loss, and what his colder framing can obscure, is that the connections that survive the renegotiation are the only ones worth having in the first place. A relationship that required your overextension to maintain was not a relationship. It was an arrangement in which you were the primary contributor, and the arrangement was disguised as mutual. When the overextension stops, the arrangement reveals itself. That revelation is information. Painful information, but information nonetheless. And information is the currency of good decisions. The final thing to understand about all of this is what it does to your relationship with yourself. When you operate without these principles, you give, and then feel the slow erosion of something essential. You begin to distrust your own generosity. You begin to wonder if being good is a foolish project. You begin to experience a resentment that has no clean target because the problem is structural, not personal. You are not resentful of specific people. You are resentful of a pattern. But because you cannot name the pattern clearly, the resentment diffuses into your worldview, and your worldview begins to darken. When you operate with these principles, the resentment dissolves, not because you care less, but because you are no longer operating at a structural loss. Your giving is now calibrated to your capacity. Your openness is now proportional to what has been established. Your forgiveness is now a choice rather than a reflex. And because it is a choice, it comes with no residue. Clean giving leaves no debt. Clean forgiveness leaves no wound. Clean presence leaves no exhaustion. This is what structure does for kindness. It doesn't diminish it, it cleans it. Machiavelli did not conclude that virtue is useless. He concluded that virtue without power is exposed, and exposure is indistinguishable from weakness in environments that select against it. Your kindness is not the problem. Your structure is. Build the structure. Arm your goodness, not because the world deserves less of you, but because your goodness deserves to survive contact with it. If you have found truth in this, not comfort, but truth, then your next step is not inspiration. It is implementation. Begin this week with one boundary that you state once, and do not renegotiate. Begin with one relationship where you observe incentives rather than intentions for 7 days without changing your behavior, just watching. Begin by identifying one area where you have been carrying a weight that belongs to someone else and setting it down with care, but with finality. These are not dramatic gestures. They are small structural corrections. And structural corrections, compounded over time, change everything. If you want to continue this kind of conversation, the kind that does not flatter you, but does sharpen you, subscribe. And if this video moved something in you, leave a comment below, not about whether you agree, but about which of these principles you have already been living, without knowing it had a name.